Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Bitcoin Lore channel. This is the third of a 15-part series of videos entitled Fundamentals of Finance and Bitcoin. This third part is called Why Savings Stopped Working. It must be understood within the context of the previous two episodes. The second one dealt with inflation, and the first one dealt with money and wealth. Now, the takeaway from this part 3 is that modern finance punishes prudence. That requires unpacking in terms of what its meaning is. The hook of this video is our grandparents and parents in years past were able to save. But now we have to speculate because of the momentum that has been built by inflation via the global fiat currency. So let's get into the video. Before we get started in this video, let's take a moment and think about what is meant by Bitcoin and what is meant by the Bitcoin lore. So, Bitcoin is a decentralized form of finance. But if you've seen our previous videos, and I highly recommend that you go back and watch them, in order to gain the appreciation of realizing that Bitcoin is a lot more than decentralized finance, electronic money. It is also a protocol. It's a mixture of hardware and software. It is no trivial thing. And understanding Bitcoin is not something a person can do in a week, a month. It requires a lot of thinking, reflecting, in order to gain an appreciation of the mindset that Bitcoiners have. There's also a skill set involved because, after all, by not using governments and banks, you become more responsible in all of the mindsets and skill sets and actions that are required in order to transact online. You need a device, you need to have some Bitcoin, you need to have an internet connection, and we will get into the details of it in future videos and deep dives. But at the heart of Bitcoin is blockchain. Blockchain is a technology that's at the heart of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was not only the first cryptocurrency launching and a fair launch. We will get into what that means in future videos. Launched fairly, mined fairly, such that in January of 2009, the blockchain, in terms of the Genesis block, started not only existing, but operating for 17 plus years ongoing until now. Now, the blockchain is, for all intensive purposes, a record, a block of data in a chain of datas where transactions are recorded. When other cryptocurrencies came along, after all, Bitcoin's code is what they call open source, which is somewhat of a misleading term. Open source can mean anyone could look at the code, but not necessarily take the code and make changes to it. But this is something where it's open source in the traditional sense of people can copy and paste Bitcoin's blockchain code and create other projects. For example, Ethereum. Now, Ethereum is the blockchain of ETH, ETH. ERC20 is the protocol by which transactions can take place. To say blockchain has over the course of many years taken on a generic term. But blockchain is originally the technology of Bitcoin. That's really important to stress. Having said that, when people say Ethereum, they're talking about the blockchain, not ETH or ETH, the coin, the token, which there's a difference. As you can see, there's a lot of meanings and values to those meanings to be unpacked, and we will. We just need time. Having said that, I want to give you an example of something that I had talked about in previous videos, where I had said something to the effect of people trivialize how serious something is, an endeavor, taking on the quest and journey and adventure of trying to understand Bitcoin and appropriating it in their lives, going from potential to actual Bitcoiners. Now, having said that, blockchain is a very serious thing. I want to give an example. Now, the book doesn't matter and the author doesn't matter, but just to drive home a point, here's a book, nearly 800 pages long. Okay? Now, so this is a serious book, 22 chapters, close to 800 pages. Even if someone has the talent to be technical and studies this is something that could take a semester if you go by that system and went to university by that system. There's also the quarterly and other ways. I went by the semester system. It could also be argued that the 22 chapters can be divided up in half, roughly, and you can spend an entire year, 2 semesters, with the same professor learning blockchain and its history, starting from Bitcoin, then going into Ethereum and how the blockchain of ETH is something that brought new technologies to the table. Smart contract, DApp, decentralized apps, the ability to make non-fungible tokens, meme coins on the Ethereum blockchain, and so on and so forth. There's been legitimate and not legitimate blockchains. What I mean by non-legitimate is people that have claimed to have a blockchain and even had blockchain parties didn't even have a blockchain. Or they promised that there would be a blockchain for this or for that. If someone does a deep dive such that they get to the point of what's really the point of the blockchain, it could be something that people can find it extremely difficult to believe. And what is that? Well, eternal. That is to say, you have a record that is eternal. Now, it's not eternal, strictly speaking, any more than gold, precious metals, fiat currency, homes, building homes is a finite asset. It's finite. No one knows the number. I certainly don't. History is unfolding before us. So the point I'm trying to make is blockchain is not only a very serious thing, but the most serious to those who have this kind of view of technology that goes beyond what people would traditionally accept as the meanings and values of a blockchain. I hope that I've imparted to you and given you the impression that a silly question like, are we in a bubble? Housing bubble, AI bubble, crypto bubble, is the bubble gonna pop? I'm sorry, I'm just asking for a friend. They'll say, is Bitcoin a scam? So these are silly questions that people that are not willing to make the commitment of taking life and Bitcoin seriously. Because the short answer is no, Bitcoin is not a scam. Have there been people who used Bitcoin because it brought out the worst in them as a means to an end of making a lot of money? Absolutely. Also, the interesting thing is other people who have pointed out these scams were consequently sued by the lawyers of scam artists, scumbags, con artists, not good examples of what human beings should become. And those people who tried to expose it were sued. Now, I'm not interested in talking about the history of geographically and the individuals that were involved and the names, because there's this weird kind of thing that happens when someone points out bad behavior on the part of fellow human beings. They get labeled a hater and they get attacked online. But no one would find it difficult to do a little bit of a research online and find all these different countries with all these different shady folks that did things. But nonetheless, the point is here that Bitcoin is not a scam and there's legitimate people out there. Saying nice things about people is a better and more fun thing to record. So I'll drop at least one name. Andreas Antonopoulos, a British Greek person, a very technical person. He has written a lot of books. Mastering Bitcoin is one of them. And he's seen, and rightfully so, as someone who was a champion for Bitcoin. Him being a very technical person, he was able to articulate blockchain and the various parts of Bitcoin that are technical in nature, and he's highly respected, highly regarded in the early days of Bitcoin. I could say personally that he is a true inspiration, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for a person like a character of Andreas Antonopoulos. Of course, there are others, but that goes beyond the scope of this video. Getting back to the topic of part 3 of why savings stop working. That is to say, a person is hired or has their own business. They work 40, 50 years, 80, 100,000 hours. They save money and then they retire. They have their 401k, which is a type of, if you're not familiar with the US 401k, it's basically putting money in a savings that is issued by the government and approved by the government so that it compounds interest and a person can have enough money when they retire to live out their sunset years. That was true in World War II, prior to it, 1939 to 1945, going all the way into the 80s and 90s, even in the early 2000s, but depending on the country and the socio-political, economic, macro market conditions. But having said that, it's not true anymore, such that one person in a nuclear family could work and they can have a car or two, take vacations and all that. Now there is a somewhat emerging of a cost of living crisis where we talked about inflation. That's the culprit, something that's alleged by many and believed to be done by design on purpose to crush the middle class and keep people working and being a working poor. What we have to understand is that in the past, savings increased someone's security. They had the courage of their convictions to be relaxed. But today, savings is the total opposite end of the spectrum, which is it guarantees loss. People save up money, put it in a bank account, and even though the number goes up because they're saving weekly, monthly, because of the printing of money and other conditions, which we'll do deep dives in the future, the money is being debased, the cost of living is going up, it's being inflated, and things that cost less cost more. This forces people to think about what are their options. Do I get gold? Silver? What do I do? We here, the team at Bitcoin Lore believe that Bitcoin is the best answer to that question and the best solution to that problem. That is to say, financial anxiety is something that has to be taken really seriously. You would think that I was being melodramatic by saying it's a battle, a financial battle for your financial life. But it's not a joke, and I do mean it. Being prudent and prudent being punished, the takeaway, is such that people think, oh, the wisdom of old times of yesteryear is true now, and I can be prudent in the sense of I'm doing what is the commonly held zeitgeist of our times, the spirit of the age, the meanings and values that my parents, their parents' parents, and so on and so forth had. But that's not the case anymore. So we have to stop thinking in traditional terms and realize that technology has changed our lives, such that snail mail, regular mail of old is no longer the case. No one would ask what email is, and people use it. But there was a time when email was new, and people would say, well, what the hell is email? You can find it on YouTube. Educated people that went to the best schools in the world, from Asia to North America, are on video asking the other person, well, what the hell is email? So the adoption of technologies, whether it's the internet, which is a network of computers, email is one of the services that it has protocols, and World Wide Web is another part of that network of computers using protocols to communicate. And that adoption took quite a bit. Yet the adoption, when compared to Bitcoin is being adopted a lot faster. This is the main takeaway from this particular video. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be looking forward to making the next video and seeing you in it. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.